My name is Dara Woo, and the project that I'm most recently in is The Picture of Dorian Gray on Broadway.
Let's talk a little bit about the Picture of Dorian Gray. It's one of my favorite books because of so much of the psychological aspect of it. Why did you want to be a part of this production?
Oh my, that's a great question. I think honestly, the first thing that led me to it was one, it was on Broadway. Also, Sarah Snook is an absolute force to be reckoned with. I was a huge fan of her on Succession. I actually have my own TikTok account and I was posting like Shiv Roy acting clips. So just I'm a huge fan of hers. And then also I had heard really great things about Kip Williams, the director, and the entire production. They had won a bunch of awards in London and in the West End. And so I was just super honored when I had made it, honestly, to the first callback even. And so I was super piqued and was like, I have to get on this project. And I was so excited when I finally got the call.
You've done a lot of, you've done a couple of film projects. Why go onto the stage after being in films?
Yeah. I think, I had heard. Admittedly, I have done mostly TV and film. I haven't done a lot of theater. And I had just heard a lot about how theater is like the purest form of acting you can get. I forget who I was watching an interview of, but they were saying something like, the problem with TV and film acting is you could be delivering this amazing monologue, and then the camera is zooming in on a foot. And I have found that to be the case. Um, Admittedly, also it just, I wanted to really get better at my craft, really perfect it. And I felt like theater was such like an organic, it's the original way of being an actor. And I really wanted to sink my teeth into a script and just really get familiar with perfecting a performance over and over again. So it's been awesome.
Other than just acting in projects, is there anything you do to better your craft when you're not on set or on stage?
Yeah. Yeah, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I post acting clips on TikTok. And so I don't post any auditions, I will say that. But I do post like already aired scenes. So I will research characters who I think that I could play well, or who I'm like, oh, I think I have a different take on the character. And then I will film a scene, post it. And that's been very fruitful. But it's also been good because I get to invest in research like characters who I feel like are very different from myself. I recently did a scene where I played somebody who was like definitely a little bit out of their minds, wearing a tie-dye shirt. I'm crying over like a lost brick. So I feel like that has been really great for me. And I think also with TV and film, a lot of it is like the camera's very close up. If you make certain subtle movements, it's very big on screen. And so I didn't want to just do acting classes. I specifically wanted to hone my craft as a TV and film actor, and making sure I watch my scenes a lot to make sure I like what I'm doing, and if I feel like I feel like, I can see improvements when I record my scenes. So, yeah, I would say TikTok's number one, the number one way. I have a really great acting coach. Um, I'm not sure if he wants me to say his name, but he's an awesome acting coach, and I feel like he's really helped me hone my craft. Um, I think I have a tendency to over improv, and so he was really great as an acting coach to help me like tighten my lines and making sure I'm like hitting the beats, and really nailing a less indie performance is what he would say. So yeah, working with him and then posting my acting clips.
That's awesome. From doing research, you were quite a successful software engineer before going into acting. How did that pivot come to be? Because it seems that you went from a very structured career path to a little bit more chaotic,
Yeah.
spontaneous.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. I was a software engineer as of 2 months ago. I was a software engineer at Lyft, the rideshare company. I was there for almost 4 years after graduating with my computer science degree. So even now, I still think of myself very much as a technologist and an entrepreneur. So I think I don't want to be seen as someone who quit software engineering and is transitioned fully into acting. Um, I think, at least my own identity is someone who kind of balances the line and it will always have one foot in Hollywood and then one foot in tech. But yeah, it's been crazy. I basically let's see, I was in college during COVID and I was going crazy. It was like definitely a quarter life crisis. I was like, I don't know if I can stay a software engineer the rest of my life. I have this little poster from when I was in first grade of like what I want to be when I grow up. And I wrote, I want to be an actor. And I've been taking acting classes for years and I was like, if not now, then when? If not who, then who? If not me,
Mhm.
then who? So I just decided to go full throttle into acting. I moved to LA right after I graduated from college, did acting there, decided to go to New York. I felt like New York was a great city with, admittedly, it just has more tech opportunities than LA. So yeah, I was auditioning on the side. I was working as a software engineer. The good news with software engineering is my team was mostly like they were all PST California based. So I was hitting auditions in the morning, and then by the time it's 11 a.m., 12 p.m. Eastern time, that's still 8 a.m., 9 p.m., 9 a.m. for them. So I was able to just work a full, work day afterwards. But yeah, it's been quite a whirlwind. I literally was working um as a software engineer and then kind of immediately went full time into being a Broadway actor, which was just, I think my brain is still adjusting.
Wow, that's incredible. It seems that you try to do everything possible to satisfy the person you want to be. Doing acting and going after roles that are not necessarily, similar to your personality. How does that help to define who you are as a person and how you see yourself?
Good question. So I guess you're asking like, how do I reconcile auditioning as characters who have a different personality than
Mhm.
myself? It's hard. I will say auditioning for like a younger teen role, because I am like, in my 20s right now, is a little bit tough because I, I've lived so much life since high school. So, I will say like auditioning for teen roles is tough. I would say like other than like a teen role though, I think the best thing is to be open-minded and to be empathetic, right? You want to put yourself into the shoes of the other person and really understand why they're acting the way they are. You never want to judge your character, and you want to yeah, I guess be as compassionate to your character as possible because no villain ever thinks that they're the villain.
Mhm.
In fact, I kind of enjoy playing villains a little bit. So I think in terms of like developing my own character, I'm like, oh, maybe I'm a little spicy here. But yeah, I would say just being open-minded and empathetic. I think as long as it's like any sort of like female character who really struggles with something or like wants something really bad, is a student, is the villain, someone who like um I guess is like not afraid to be messy and make mistakes. I love those type of characters. Maybe because I kind of feel that way about myself, having done two different career paths and, jumped around from a bunch of different activities in my life. But yeah, I really do enjoy like a complicated female character.
Going with a little bit of that, the entertainment industry is a little chaotic. You get a lot of no's before you get the yes that you want. How do you keep your mental health in a more positive place when you're going through so much I guess rejection when you go up for parts?
I love that question. There is so much rejection in this industry, especially because it's sort of struggling right now. Anyways, I think my number one tip is to have something else in your life that you care
Mhm.
about. And I think as much as software engineering wasn't the role for me, I will never talk badly about my time in tech because it kind of I would argue like the balance of the two really saved my life because when acting was being really frustrating, things at my software engineering job were hopefully going very well. Um, I will say there were a few times when both were going a little not well, which is not great. But in general, you can kind of rely on one thing or the other to help your mental health state. It's sort of like you submit an audition that you hope is going to change your life, and then you have to jump onto a work call. and you
Mhm.
can't think about it anymore. I think even a really good example is like for the Picture of Dorian Gray. I almost didn't go to the audition because it's a Broadway, audition. I knew there was going to be tens of thousands of people at this audition. I was like, there's no way I'm getting this. But it happened to be a block from my office. And the audition would have been during my lunch break. And I was like, and I also try not to turn down audition. So I was like, sure, let me waddle on down to the audition room. It's next to my work. I literally coded in the morning, walked to the audition, did the audition within 30 minutes, was back in the office. And I think like I couldn't think about my audition. And
Mhm.
also, I think that helps going in too, because they're like, they ask you questions about yourself. I'm not nervous. I'm just rattling top of the dome, because I know I have other things on my brain. So I think that's kind of helped. Um, Admittedly, it makes me a little scattered and all over the place, but I think in terms of like my emotional state, it's kind of helped in that sense.
That is awesome. Coding is very difficult. It's a whole different language. It's a whole different set of languages. Uh,
Yeah.
how did you first start in coding and software engineering?
Oh. I am from the Silicon Valley. So I grew up in Cupertino, California, which is the home place of Apple. My high school is literally next to the Apple original campus and 5 minutes from the Infinity Loop. So, I'm a senior in high school. I want to walk to 7-Eleven and get myself a Slurpee. I'm walking past the Apple campus. I'm walking through the Apple campus, actually. So it's just a really tech-based area. My parents both work in tech. I wouldn't be surprised if majority of my high school um, ended up going into something in tech. I've always liked math. I've always been a math girl. That is sort of like I think that's the subject in school I was probably best at. So I was like, yeah, I want to do something mathy based. I went to a math camp my freshman year of high school. It was in the basement of a college where there was no sunlight and no AC. And I remember like sweating on the chalkboard. And I was like, well, don't want to do math anymore. Closest thing was coding from there. Coding is nice.
Mhm.
AC, big windows, ergonomic chairs. I was like, oh, this is kind of nice. So I think I honestly just liked the bougie aspect of
Mhm.
coding more than just like it was math based but more bougie. And that was kind of my initial thoughts. I guess for the Silicon Valley, I started late. I started coding maybe when I was 16.
Oh.
I went to a beginning Python class at the local library, and I remember I'm like 5'8". I'm kind of tall for
Mhm.
somebody. And I'm like sitting in this like little IKEA chair next to all these like little, I don't know, second graders learning how to code.
Mhm.
And that was pretty hard. That was a hard blow to the soul. But I just stuck with it. And I think, years after the fact, I realized like maybe I love tech, but I don't love like implementation as much.
Mhm.
But yeah, that was my start, just as a local Silicon Valley girl.
That is awesome. Tech is usually seen as the boys' club. So, ha have you had any obstacles as a woman in tech?
Oh, when have I not have an obstacle? Yeah, I would say I am very passionate about getting young women into coding and tech. And my number one piece of advice for them is always the job is very different than the education you get. Not only are the classes different, but just like the environment is different. I remember feeling very upset about studying computer science in school. The classes, not only are they male, but they're just like they attract a certain type of person who I didn't feel like I vibed with necessarily. And I felt very lost. I remember I was taking also a lot of theoretical computer science classes. Couldn't tell you a single thing I learned. They were very difficult. And so I didn't like the people. I didn't what I like. I would like what I was learning, and I was like, I cannot see myself staying in this type of environment with people, who are just trying to one up each other with like test scores and
Mhm.
um, like like I stayed up until 6 a.m. coding this thing before the night before it was due. I'm like, that's so
Mhm.
chaotic. But the job itself was very different. I would say software engineering is very different than a computer science degree, and it's so hard to abstract the two apart from each other. And I think a lot of young women get discouraged because they take these CS classes and they're like, "This is terrible," and I'm like, "Girl, I know," but the workplace has was actually. I don't really have anything bad to say about my time at Lyft. It was really great. Yeah, which is kind of yeah, I'm very fortunate to say, especially because my first job out of college, but workplace I actually have been very lucky. My mom was an engineer well, she's been she was an engineer probably in like the 90s and 2000s. She had a lot of issues. So I never want to lessen the struggles of what it's like to be a woman in tech. I was just very fortunate because I'm in the
Hmm.
2025. I was also working at kind of a younger startup type company. So I think that kind of helped with my experience. But not to say it doesn't still exist, and I know it does. It definitely does. It's not like it's nothing for me, you know what I mean? But I would say that school was definitely tougher than the job.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So is there anything you would want to say to, females who are trying to get into tech, especially young females who aren't necessarily finding the right community for them to be able to continue on in their tech careers?
Let's see. I would say I feel you. I've been there. I've worked, I had 5 internships while I was in college, and not all of
Oh.
them were great. And I remember feeling very lost. And honestly, I felt so lost, and I was like, this is so antithetical to my entire essence of a being. Like, I didn't feel like I felt so out of place. And I would just say, be open-minded. Life is long, and you got to keep working. I would say you got to keep chipping away, right? So maybe one of my internships wasn't great, but I did another one, which was better. And then, I was open-minded. So I was like, well, let me try acting. 5 years of acting later, I was able to quit my software engineering job to go to Broadway full time.
Mhm.
I'm still, going to go back into tech after this and, act and do tech at the same time. But I think like, I would just say like, don't just quit. I mean, unless it's, if it's like really bad for your mental health, then you
Mhm.
gotta do what you gotta do. But I would just say like, there's a high chance it's the role or the people you are working with, and it's not like it doesn't have to be the whole thing.
Mhm.
And that's honestly even hard for myself to reckon with of like, oh gosh, like, do I hate the job or do I just hate this specific
Mhm.
aspect of the job? And it's tough to figure out, I still am learning it myself. But I would just say, like, don't get discouraged. There's many roles within tech. I would just say, like, stay in school, keep with the grind, and honestly being open-minded to all different types of opportunities. And it's easier to figure out what you don't want to do than it is to figure out what you do want to do.
Mhm.
So if you don't like something, switch until you find the right thing.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on all your success. You're multifaceted. It's so incredible to hear everything you have going for you. So thank you very much for your time.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Jesus. It was awesome chatting with you today.